my name is Yu-Lan. I'm head of product at Checkstep. Very quick word about Checkstep. We're a B2B SaaS platform. We help other smaller platforms than Bumble with their online harms generated by harmful users and harmful content. And prior to that, I was a data scientist at Meta, also back then known as Facebook, also working in what's called internally integrity, but which is trust and safety. And I was specifically focusing on like all the cool stuff like counterterrorism, suicide, self-harm, and adult sexual exploitation and sextortion. So I've seen pretty much a lot of bad things happening, and it's really a passion. Like it might sound weird, but I think like fighting bad people on the internet is something I feel and care deeply about. And so that's actually my talk for today. I just wanted to give everyone a general primer on what is trust and safety and how it's used actually to keep people safe, both on online platforms and on dating platforms. Oh, and I came from Belgium, but I officially live in the UK, but I'm a bit of a digital nomad. So if you want to learn more about digital nomadism, come talk to me afterwards. So actually, I'd like to see who here has, well, within the population that has used dating apps, who has experienced unpleasant, harmful, or dangerous behavior online. Please raise your hands. Okay, pretty few. Okay. So I won't go into individual questions on what you have experienced, but I'll just give you an idea of what that could be. So specifically in online dating, there's a lot of issues with fake accounts, catfishing, impersonation, basically people pretending to be someone else to get something from other people. Lots of scams. This was not only like in dating apps at Facebook, we had lots of romance scammers as well. Lots of unsolicited adult nudity, to put it nicely. Non-consensual intimate imagery, which is something I'll talk a bit more later. Harassment and abuse verbally, sadly, and also hopefully in lesser volumes, child sexual abusive material as well. So, introduction to trust and safety. So generally, trust and safety as a function, we deal with all types of harms. And this is not even an exhaustive list, but it's pretty much like the worst of the worst out there. And as you can see, these are like different names in different companies. They're called different things. They can have different namings, but this is like the kind of quite a comprehensive list. And it's actually quite interesting because some of these policies, any online platform has to deal with them, like terrorism content and CSAM, child sexual abusive material, is illegal. So if a platform finds it online, they have to report it. And if you're an online platform and you don't, like, please look this up. And then for all these other policies, I think if you see them, you kind of think like, oh, that actually makes sense to have a policy, a couple of rules written on what can and cannot be on the platform. However, if you think about a social media app, they might be very keen on not having any nudity or violence. But if you're a gaming platform, actually most gaming platforms are pretty okay with guns and violence, definitely if it's like shooter games. So even within different verticals, all these policies like have different thresholds. As you can imagine, like online marketplaces are nowadays very, very keen on keeping their platform safe from scammers, fake goods, drugs, other illegal goods. So that's a bit what covers the trust and safety scope. So what is trust and safety? It's what people know as content moderation, but it's actually so much more. It's a really very cross-functional organization used to protect users and communities, but also safeguard the reputation and the brand. And these go hand in hand, of course. Like if the company's brand goes down, users go down. It's like quite circular. And it covers like different functions. So first up is the policy people. So actually defining rules is pretty hard. It might sound obvious, but like saying that you can allow, for example, in my case, a terrorist organization on the platform, like who designates what is a terrorist organization? And we have like different looking people here, so I can assure you that some people have different opinions on whether an organization is considered terrorist, for example. On the technology side, this is probably like the more data science focused thing, is we have people building products for prevention, for detection, and enforcement. So this is engineers, data scientists, data engineers, designers, user research. And then the operation. So very often people think that AI can just take down content, and why did Facebook not take this down already, and like why is it so hard? Very often content has to be reviewed by humans before being taken down. Like in some cases of like very dangerous content, that that content is actually evidence to, for example, subpoena someone or like have a, like form the basis of a search warrant. And so if you as a platform have that material to like actually go and arrest someone, you better be sure that it's not a false positive. And it has actually happened, I think, with, I think a guy, he posted, well, he took a picture of his son's groin because there was some inflammation and sent it to the GP, except that it uploaded on Google Drive, and Google Drive has a CSAM classifier, and so the police showed up at his door with like, why do you have child nudity? So like there's a lot of issues, and it's really important to have humans in the loop to actually look at this nuance. This means for some companies like managing tens, hundreds, and thousands of moderators, which is a whole practice in itself. It needs project management, people management, it needs training, it needs tooling, like what do they use to review content? So like it's a whole industry in itself. And then the last thing is different functions like outreach. So bigger companies have outreach functions, and these are people who work directly with FBI, CIA, and other police functions to make sure that if there's a threat online, they can directly communicate. There's also investigators who do more like detailed investigations into networks. Definitely at Facebook, that was a big thing. And compliance teams to make sure that all of this happens in a way that is compliant with regulations, and mainly data privacy regulations, as you can imagine. Actually, to this point, like very many people are surprised that there's a lot of regulations in Europe, and one of them is called the e-privacy directive, which actually makes it not possible to moderate messages in Europe. And so, like, you know, compliance teams will deal with all these details and make sure that this also is embedded into the product. Trust and safety workflow. So I think some people will present a bit more about prevention, but the best thing for trust and safety and keeping your users safe is like preventing anything from happening before even reacting to anything from happening. The first thing is education and awareness. Like, I don't know how many online apps you use, but very few of them will actually tell you how to navigate the platform safely. And sadly, lots of harms are caused by good people, like not people with bad intent. Of course, there are like a few people with bad intent that create a lot of harm, but even uploading personal information on the platform could be against the policies, but lots of people might not know and end up sharing like personal details online and then being scammed. Then the second part is product safety features. You can imagine that on some apps, it might be good to have identity verification or age verification to make sure that people who sign up are who they say they are. You can also imagine in other cases that anonymity is quite required. And then the last aspect is like user features. So I think most people have options in their apps to block people, to downrank people, to hide content. And so these are kind of like the three buckets of prevention. And as I said, like it's always better to prevent something from happening before trying to go into the detection. And so on the detection side, people think AI, but from experience, actually heuristics go a very, very long way. Keywords, rules, they go a long way up until bad actors figure out the keywords, and then they circumvent them and add some emojis or add some other weird characters, and then it becomes always like harder and harder and harder to find them. And then we have AI, and actually this is a super fascinating space. Because you can imagine it's text, it's image, it's video, it's audio, and it's a combination of all of them together that should result in like whether or not a person is acting suspiciously or whether content is bad. And so that's actually the flow then that the AI will detect something, and then a moderator might review it and then decide what to do with it. Luckily, there's also a way to actually make this much, much cheaper. It's called hashing. Where known bad content gets added to, say, an image repository, and every time someone uploads an image that is like very similar to the image that is already in the repository, like the system can take it down automatically, which is much faster, much cheaper. The only thing is then, like at Facebook, this has happened before. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but sometimes people by accident add like, I don't know, a GIF or a meme in the image bank, and then all of a sudden like millions of GIFs and memes go down on the platform unintentionally. And then the last thing within proactive detection is behavioral detection. Like more and more, this is becoming really important to not just look at content, but also the overall behavior of users and whether they act like scammy. Like if a user, for example, starts messaging people within seconds of signing up and they start messaging 100 people, probably something fishy happening there. And then the other aspect of detection is user reports. So most of the time users can also report content or people on platforms. And then the third part is the enforcement. So once you've gone through like setting your policies, what is allowed, what is not allowed, once you've like added the detection, then what do you do with the content? Do you take it down? Do you delete it? Are you removing free speech? Like what's the boundary there? So there's a couple things, we kind of call it hard actions and soft actions. Hard actions is deleting a user, disabling a user and deleting content, but there's a whole range within there. It's also possible to make content not recommendable or searchable or discoverable in any other way. So that's more like the soft actions, or there's also a way to maybe say like to a user that they're temporarily deleted for a certain amount of days. And then there's also more shady actioning like shadow banning, which is the practice of letting a user interact with the environment, thinking that they're interacting with the environment, but actually no one else can see what they're doing. So yeah, there's a whole range of things that can happen there, and it's up to each platform to decide what they want to do in the context of like keeping their users safe, but also protecting free speech. And it's a tricky one. The fourth thing is adapting. So once you go through this loop, adaptation is really important, not only because you have the whole operational aspect, like you want to measure how many man hours are spent on reviewing content, how much content is taken down, how much bad content is on the platform. But bad actors get really, really good at circumventing. It's like whack-a-mole. It's literally like you find one solution and they'll come up with another solution. And people get like very, very, very creative. So like having good metrics to measure that is really important. The other thing within adaptation is AI explainability. Like I think it's very, very important for platforms to know what data their models are trained on and how that will impact detection. Definitely if like different languages and cultures are involved. And then there's also A/B testing, just like making sure that there's an experimentation framework set up to test different policies. And last but not least, compliance. So this is becoming more and more of a thing. I would say definitely the big tech platforms have driven European regulators mainly and UK regulators to write rules about what online safety should be. And I think recently generative AI has also kind of like put everything into acceleration for the AI Act to try and regulate generative AI, which is all with very good intent. In practice, it might be a bit trickier. Most of the online safety regulations now are focusing on transparency, both in terms of how much content platforms are taking down, but the other aspect is transparency to the user. So from February 2024 next year, when the Digital Services Act gets into, I don't know, when it gets validated or gets into enforcement, users will need to know when content is taken down. When any action is taken down against them, they have the right to know. They have the right to know whether that was a manual or an AI-driven action, and they have the right to appeal or even go for out-of-court settlement dispute. And this means that the previous enforcement action I talked about, like shadow banning, where you kind of let a user play with the platform without them knowing, like it won't make any sense. Like you won't tell a user like, hey, we kind of let you interact with the platform, but no one else can see you. Like all these type of things will have to become a bit different, like a bit smarter about it. The online safety bill, in addition, is like also very stringent on age and minors, trying to protect minors by embedding more age verification methods into different platforms. And I think that's it. There's also the AI Act, which is very interesting. Like in terms of generative AI, the AI Act will probably require the providers of the AI models to label content that was generated by AI, but I think you can all imagine how easy it is to circumvent that. So yeah, that's on the compliance side. So this is becoming a really big thing. And I was having a conversation with someone around like, are our jobs protected? And I think in trust and safety and compliance, we definitely will have more work than less. We also have new challenges. I just like had a quick search on ChatGPT. And I think I have a couple examples here on ChatGPT being used to like talk with people, or even AI bots to talk with many people at the same time, or people using like apps to create profile pictures of them where they look better, where they're maybe even in a country where they are not, to make it look like they're, I don't know, well-traveled, and deepfake also, sadly. And so I think this is super interesting. I mean, it's scary as well, because where do you draw the boundary? Like if I'm like, if you're not a native speaker, is it okay to use a bit of GPT to help you write content? But where do we draw the boundary? Is it okay to like Photoshop a bit your images? I don't know, like I have my own opinion, and I'm sure that the room here will be quite divided. So this is actually really a turning point. I personally think there's a scary time ahead of us, but also exciting if you're like in the space trying to do something about it, because like the traditional content moderation just won't work anymore. Like just detecting an image, like it will be really, really hard to detect when an image was AI generated. So it's on the platforms, on the LLM providers to label content as AI generated for sure, although that's easily circumvented. It's up to them also to put systems in place that it's really hard to create maybe news using AI. But then it's also on the platforms who use this type of content or where this content can spread to detect them. And I personally believe that we'll shift more and more towards behavioral detection. Like, for example, looking at how fast someone's typing, if they're just copy pasting, like probably there's a bit of a signal there. And so more and more, I think we'll have to go towards behavioral detection to see whether people are using AI to do shady things. But then that comes then into the point with privacy regulations is like how much data and metadata can you actually use? So yeah, lots of topics to discuss. I have no answers, I'm sorry. And then the last thing I wanted to briefly talk about is that for people who have used dating apps, I think staying safe is really important, and talking about bad experiences is really important. I had the opportunity, I guess, to work on sextortion and suicide at the same time when I was at Meta, and sadly there was a crossover of people being sextorted committing suicide. And so actually at Meta we were working on a project with Stop NCII, they're the revenge porn helpline. And when we started this project, the idea was like, Facebook wants to help. So what can you do? Send Facebook your nudes, and we'll put them in an image bank. And so every time something gets uploaded on the platform, we'll take it down. Obviously, you can imagine for lots of data privacy reasons, that's a really bad idea. So Stop NCI actually created the idea to upload your images on their platform, but hash them on your device. So basically, you create a digital fingerprint on your phone, and you send the fingerprint to Stop NCI. They send it to Facebook, to Instagram, I believe, TikTok, Hinge or Bumble, I don't know, one of the platforms, and Reddit. And so what happens is that every time someone uploads your nude that you didn't want out there, they will take it down. So I think it's a great initiative. And the same thing, if you get scammed online, romance scams, action fraud in the UK is your thing. So that was it. Feel free to stay in touch with me or come talk with me after the talk. Thank you.